Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Charlotte, and this is your Wild Lunch Wednesday coming to you live from the Zoological Society of London. This is our very first lunchtime event, so we really hope you enjoy it. It's all about giving you the opportunity to meet our scientists and conservationists at ZSL and hear more about their experiences out in the field. Now, I've got lots of questions for our experts, but we really welcome your questions too. So if you would like to submit a question, all you need to do is to send us a question using Pigeonhole. Now, Pigeonhole, here we go, here's the link, is a free platform. You can access it by going to www.pigeonhole.at/2026. That's /2026. And there you will find a page where all you need to do is type in your question for today's expert, and we will try and get through as many of those questions as we can during the next 30 minutes. So www.pigeonhole.at/2026 is what you need. Now, as I mentioned, Wild Lunch Wednesdays are very much about giving you the opportunity to hear from our scientists and conservationists who work at the Zoological Society of London. And today we are joined by Chris Yesson, who works within our Institute of Zoology. Chris is going to be talking to us all about his fieldwork in Greenland. So hopefully, Chris, you're there. Just need to turn your camera and mic on.
So my mic's on, but it says I can't. There we go. Start my video. Sorry.
Hey, fantastic. The joys of live streaming. Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us, Chris. I'm really looking forward to this sort of virtual experience, exploring the deep seas of Greenland. I'm going to start with what might be quite a difficult question, which is to ask you to describe in only 3 words what fieldwork in Greenland is like. How would you describe it to our viewers?
Yeah, the 3-word thing is quite tricky, but I think I'd probably go with exciting, cold, and it's a bit of a cheat, but hard work. You have to imagine a hyphen in there.
Right. Okay. So it's not all glamour. You don't just get to sit back and relax. There is a lot of hard work involved. But I'm looking forward to hearing more then over the next 30 minutes. I'm sure we're definitely going to be talking about the cold in particular, and 1 or 2 icebergs as well. But before we get on to all of that, Chris, why do you go to Greenland in the first place? I know you've been out there several times now for field work, but what does your research actually involve? What are you trying to find out?
It's actually our 10th anniversary of going to Greenland. So we've been working there for 10 years. And 10 years ago, we were invited to go out and do some research in partnership with Sustainable Fisheries Greenland, which is a consortium of fishing companies in Greenland. And they were entering a Marine Stewardship Council certification, so like an eco-sustainability on their fishing. And to do that, you need to know that you're not damaging the habitats. And very little is known about the seabed habitats in Greenland. And so they asked us to bring our cameras and use our expertise to try to identify, take pictures of what's there, and basically study what's there and try to assess what impact the fishing is having there.
Fantastic. Sorry, Chris, I'm just trying to bring up my screen again so we can actually show some of the images from your field work to get a feel for what it's like out there. We've got a photo, here we go, of one of the vessels you've been out on to do your field work. Is this specifically a research vessel?
So this is an old trawler formerly used for commercial fishing that was co-opted into a research vessel. So its main task is to do scientific stock assessments, so counting how many shrimp there are so that we can manage the shrimp populations. And so that big arch at the back, the black arch at the back is kind of where you hoist the net up, and it kind of drops off of the back and catches shrimp on a kind of randomized surveys to allow them to properly manage their stocks, to make sure they're not fishing too many. There's a picture of a shrimp. Yeah, so this is one of our pictures. So shrimp, cold water shrimp, they're maybe about this big, if you can see that. And they sit on the seabed, and you can catch them in the nets. But really interesting for us is that they sit on the seabed at night, in the daytime, and that means that they can't fish for them at night time. And that allows us to take our cameras on the stock assessment and drop our cameras off the side at night time, so that we can take pictures like this when otherwise the fishermen on board would be working.
Well, that in itself, Chris, must be hard work, having to get up in the middle of the night to carry out your research rather than during the day, which I'm sure is when you would prefer to be doing it. Whereabouts in Greenland are you carrying out this research?
So we've actually worked the entire west coast of Greenland, up from as far north as 1,000 kilometers inside the Arctic Circle. I think you've got a map here. This is Greenland, so it's a bit to the north and the west of the UK there, and the whole stretch of the west coast, from Melville Bay up in the north, all the way down to the southern tip. We've been doing surveys over the past 10 years. A lot of that work has been focused maybe around Disco Bay and then down to Nuuk, the capital city. So a lot of work along there. One of the nice things about working in Greenland in the summer, though, is we have 24 hours of daylight, which means that the night shift isn't so much struggling to work in the dark. You're still kind of rubbing your eyes blearily, but it's actually bright light at midnight.
I didn't think of that. That at least must help. Having a bit of light, bit of sunshine to keep you going. You mentioned the ship that you're living and working on board. What is it like spending so much time on board a vessel like that out at sea, Chris?
Yeah, so our trips are kind of probably 2 weeks on average, and you're at sea for that whole time. There's always a premium space. You pack in as many people as you can, so you can get as much work done as possible, and that means that things like your cabins are really, really small. And so there's a picture of my cabin bed on one cruise, and it's essentially like a coffin. And every time you wake up in the morning, well, at least I would just dunk my head on the ceiling there, and you might be sharing with somebody who's directly below you. So every little turn, you're creaking and disturbing people below you. But it's one of those things that you put up with to be able to get out into these really cool and exciting and remote places. Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to remind everyone to send in your questions to pigeonhole.at/2026. That's pigeonhole.at/2026. Because we have got a few people online at the moment, Chris, and we've had one question through already, which is asking whether you ever take any graduates with you on this field work. I mean, is there a big group of you involved in this work?
So I try every year to take at least one other person with me. Often that is a student of some kind, whether that be a PhD student or an intern. And occasionally I've had master's students come out with me. But the ship is full of scientists and crew. So berths from our end, it's probably 2 or 3 at most. And his is a smaller vessel. We were operating on a vessel kind of this size last year. Oh, sorry, the year before last. I would have been on there last year, but for COVID. there's only ever going to be space for a couple of people, but we do try to take students with us when we can.
Mm-hmm. So you're on board your vessel, Chris. As you mentioned, there isn't much space, and you are out at sea. Now, that photo we just saw makes it all look very, very calm and tranquil. Is it always like that? What's the sea like off of Greenland?
The west coast of Davis Strait and up to Melville is remarkably still for open ocean, but it does get rough on occasions. And my colleague at the zoo, Steve Long, took a nice video of the more extreme weather events. I think.
Yep, here we go. Let's show everyone this.
Find this of what it can be like on occasions. And you're out at sea, you're inside the Arctic Circle. Sometimes the weather is going to be bad. We do go there in the summer when the conditions are best, but occasionally it's really rough. Occasionally you're kind of sitting in your room and suddenly you just leap across one foot to your left or your right, and you just have to get used to the swaying. But it's not always easy. I myself, I get seasick. That normally lasts for 1 day or 2 days, and then you get your sea legs. 99% of people get their sea legs after 1 or 2 days, and then you kind of just put up with the waves and just get on with your work. But sometimes it's a bit tricky.
Oh dear. Well, while we're waiting for a few more questions to come in from viewers, Chris, we obviously mentioned that what you're doing out in Greenland is studying the deep sea floor. Now, how do you do that when it is so far down?
Yeah, so the depths that we're looking at, the shallowest depths that we're really interested in are kind of 200 meters down, which is already beyond normal diving range. But the deepest that we've surveyed in Greenland is 1,500 meters down. So that's a really long way down, and we can't go down there ourselves. It'd be great if we had a submarine, but unfortunately our budget doesn't stretch to that, and so we have to improvise. We're a conservation charity, and so we're always kind of trying to make do with low cost technology to try to go and survey remote places. And so we have remote cameras. We have let's see, the middle picture. Can you see?
Would you like to be able to see what the kind of things you're able to see with these cameras?
Yeah, okay, that's great. So here's a picture. So this is taken from a camera that's essentially just a standard digital SLR that's inside this metal housing that stops the pressure from breaking it. And obviously these cameras aren't designed to get wet either. And so we kind of drop it down off of a big rope onto the seabed, and it takes a picture every time it hits the seabed. And so here are some pictures, and here's the camera that took those pictures. This brings back some memories, because we actually lost this camera in 2019. As we were deploying it, the cable broke. It actually broke twice when we were on the ship, and a student who was with me the first time was quick-witted enough to grab the rope before it dropped off. But we had to carry on, and basically the fisherman tied a big knot in the string. Slightly more sophisticated than that, but and then at the very end, on the very last day of the cruise, it broke again, and we lost the camera into the depths. This is a video of it being deployed. So it essentially, you can see the setup here, where it's basically just a winch and a wire, and we lift it up, and we just drop it off of the side of the ship, and it goes down, and you can maybe see a small lead weight dropping beneath it, and as the weight hits the seabed, it triggers a picture, and then we just take a photo of directly underneath it. More recently, we've been sticking videos on the side of on this gear, so we get videos at the same time as still images. And so we can get a broader overview of what's there from a different perspective. It's really handy for getting multiple views and trying to maximize the information that we can get from those pictures, by just trying to get as many pictures as possible. It does mean we come back with like terabytes worth of data on hard drives that we then have to sit and look through.
Yeah.
So perhaps we can bring up the one of the pictures with the kind of before and after. So when we get those pictures back, our job is to have a look at those pictures, and yeah, that's the one. And try to identify what we can see in those images. So here's an example image. It's a particularly pretty one. We can see crabs and sponges and some soft corals there. And then I think the next picture might have a whole bunch of dots on it. And it's our job to essentially click on every living thing that we see and try to identify it. And sometimes that's a very difficult job because we don't have a very good inventory of all of the life that we have in the seabed in Greenland, because it's so difficult to survey. It's difficult for us to actually fetch that sponge that we can see in the bottom left-hand corner, and so identifying it to anything beyond a sponge is really tricky, and we need a whole bunch of wide word experts kind of collaborating to help us to actually get a picture of what the diversity of life is on the seabed there.
Do you find that you're often taking photos of animals that you've no idea what they are, that they're potentially new species that we weren't even aware were down there?
So the majority of time what you see are, you have a good idea of what they are, and after 10 years you kind of get a better idea, but we do see new things. And so one of my favorite animals that we see is the Carnivorous Sponge here, and we saw this for the first time in 2016, and this sponge is the first time it had been seen in West Greenland. And we kind of caught it on our video. This is a really cool animal. We got a nice video of it coming down. I say a nice video, but this is the kind of quality of video that we have to work with here. So here's our camera with the GoPro on it, and it's dropping down, and it's about to give this sponge a nice mud bath. And then you can see us lift up, and it goes away. But this sponge is really cool. It's got these little balloons on the end of its branches, and those are little shrimp traps. And they kind of attract the shrimp who crawl in, and there are little hairs on the inside. That means that they can kind of walk in, but when they try and get out, they get stuck, and then the sponge slowly consumes it. So it's a kind of like a Venus flytrap of the deep sea.
Wow, that sounds fantastic. And Chris, we've got quite a few questions starting to come in now on Pigeonhole, so I'd like to ask you a couple of them. One which I'm quite amused by is somebody's asked what are the best and worst smells on board the research vessel, or from sort of the environment that you find yourself in Greenland. Any smells in particular remain with you?
Two things. Well, working on a vessel that's kind of constantly doing trawling means that you kind of smell of fish all of the time. But some of those fish can actually smell really nice. And so there's this small capelin, and you know that you've got a capelin catch come up because suddenly there's everywhere smells of cucumber. And it's really weird. And you think, this is a fish, why does it smell of cucumber? But it's really, really nice. And that's a really pleasant smell for me. And it's like, oh, suddenly there's not the horrible fish smell, and now we've got like a fresh salad smell.
Oh, lovely. Well, that's good. Another question that's come through, Chris, is about the impact of COVID-19 on your work. I mean, you mentioned that you weren't able to go out into the field last year. Has it been a big issue for you not being able to go out? And do you think it is going to have a long-term impact on your research?
So specifically for Greenland, Greenland have done incredibly well with COVID. The last time I saw, there were 17 reported cases in the whole country. Bear in mind that it's a country of 55,000 people, so it's a small population over an incredibly large area. So social distancing is potentially a little bit easier, but you know, as being a relatively remote island, they didn't have that flow. But we were not allowed to go out there last year. There was a research cruise going on that went ahead without me, but I couldn't get out there. But fortunately, the local guys there, our collaborators at the Greenland Institute of Natural Resources, who've been a great help on all the work that we've been doing, managed to run that survey without me. We do have another cruise coming up this year, this summer, and I'm really hopeful that we're going to be allowed to travel. Fortunately, being kind of the field season is in the summer, which is when the situation's been a little bit better for us. And we do have a big stack of videos that we haven't yet processed in terms of older surveys. And so we've kind of kept ourselves busy by processing those older videos until we can get back out again.
Well, I'm going to take one more question from the audience for now, and also apologies too if we froze on you just then. I think we might have had some issues with our internet connection, but hopefully we're back. Chris, there's been a question about polar bears and whether you've come into contact with them at all during your field work in Greenland.
So the first time I went to Greenland, when I got on the ship, there were like polar bear pictures on every screen, because the week before I arrived, they'd bumped into a polar bear on the sea ice. Wow. And here's a picture that I'm not sure if this is my picture or a colleague. And I thought, wow, I'm going to see polar bears every year. And it actually took me another 7 years to see a polar bear. And this was it. I think it's in 2017. So it took me 6 years to see a polar bear. Every time we kind of get up to the sea ice, and we often do on our surveys, the ships then kind of got to navigate the ice. But that's where you're going to see the polar bears. They kind of stand on the edge of the sea ice, and you're kind of on deck and looking out. And this is one of the kind of perks of being out there. You know, you're operating your camera, but at the same time you're kind of looking out and seeing if you can see any of the cool animals, polar bears and walruses. And one time a snowy owl landed on the front of the ship and just stood at the front of the ship for I don't know, a few hours, letting us take really cool photos of it.
Oh, that's absolutely brilliant. And when you spot something cool like a polar bear, is it a case of just sort of everyone leaps out of bed or stops doing whatever they might be doing at the time to have a look?
Absolutely. You know, it's definitely an occasion when something like that comes along. It doesn't happen every time. One of the things that I've been really hoping to see while I was there is a narwhal, and you do see narwhals in Greenland and particularly in Melville Bay, the kind of far north. And one time I was on shift, and one of the fishermen came up to me and said, Chris, quick, come quick! There's a narwhal on the off the side of the ship. And I got super excited, but I knew that everybody would want to see the narwhal. So I was on night shift, and so I went around and knocked on everyone's door, said, come quick, there's a narwhal. And I got up on deck, and having woken everyone up, and it turns out it wasn't a narwhal, it was just a floating dead seal that the fisherman had mistook for a narwhal. And so I got the blame for waking everyone up to see a floating seal.
Little embarrassing.
Yeah. But, you know, dear. To take the rough with the smooth when you're there, we do get to see some really cool stuff.
Absolutely. Well, there's still time. We've got a few minutes left to send in any final questions for Chris. We've got a very popular one, Chris, that I'm going to leave till the end, because I think it'll be a nice summary. But I know we've been talking about how cold it is in Greenland. Ice is a regular occurrence when you're out in the field. Have you had any close encounters with icebergs?
Yeah, so going back to the student question, in 2015, I think it was, no, 14 maybe. I was out and took a student with me, and it was a first or second day at sea. And we were in the Disco Channel, and you get some really strong currents there. And the captain on board was paying some close attention to the inside of his eyelids. And while we had this fishing net out, and then suddenly this iceberg kind of got dragged along and smashed into the side of the ship. And as it happens, I was taking some time-lapse photography at the time, and this is the moment the iceberg smashed into the side of our ship. Now, remember that 70% of an iceberg is underwater, and so you can see the scale of this on the left of the screen. So this huge iceberg come along and smashed into the side of the ship. And the following morning, the student who was with me woke up, and her cabin was ankle deep in seawater because this iceberg had smashed a hole into the side of the ship. Fortunately, it wasn't like superstructure or anything, and we limped back to port, and basically kind of they cut a big hole in the side of the ship and stuck a big patch on the side so that we could carry on the next day. But it was certainly an eye-opener, and one that kind of made you kind of realize that this kind of work does have its dangers.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you survived to tell the tale, Chris. Now, we have had lots of questions through on Pigeonhole. Thank you all so much for submitting those for Chris. I'm sorry we can't cover them all, but one which has proved very popular and that I'd like to ask you more about, Chris, is the impact of your work and research in Greenland, and in particular, if there have been any changes or suggested changes to fisheries management in Greenland as a result of yours and ZSL's research there.
Yeah, that's a really nice question to finish on. I mean, yeah, so we talked about lots of the cool stuff about being out in Greenland, but the reason we're out there is to try to identify habitats that we think are vulnerable and then feed that information back to the fishermen and the wider authorities. And so I think we might have a nice video of the coral garden habitat. So a few years ago, we took some video of this coral garden habitat. The white fluffy things are called cauliflower corals for the obvious reason, and we found this stretch of this kind of habitat. You can see that there's fish in the area. This is kind of going to be a big nursery ground for lots of things. And so what we really don't want to be doing is taking a trawl that drags a net across the seabed and scraping all of this away. And so by identifying these and then feeding that information back, we can get these areas protected. So at the moment, this area, we've just published something on this, documenting the extent of this habitat and then putting that to the authorities, and it's currently under consideration to turn this into a fisheries closure. We had some success on that front a couple of years ago, where up in Melville Bay we found these big what they called sea flowers. They're a sea pen that might be 2 meters tall, and they have this kind of great big polyp head at the top. Wow. And they really get easily caught in nets. And the places that we identified those in Melville Bay is now closed to fisheries. So it's kind of nice conservation success. An area maybe the size of the Isle of Wight is now closed to fisheries, protected because of the work that we've been doing with our colleagues in Greenland. So it's kind of really nice to get those positive conservation outcomes from the work that we've been doing. Also, as something that we've been doing is trying to encourage gear improvements. So some of the gear is bigger and heavier and makes a bigger impact on the seabed. And now the shrimp fishery in Greenland has trawls that try to hover the bigger and heavier equipment off of the seabed. So there might be a picture of me standing on a trawl door. Or actually, the big red things at the back of this picture, those are trawl doors. And so they are the things that traditionally scrape along the seabed and keep the net open. But now new technology for the shrimp fishery in Greenland means that they don't touch the seafloor at all. And then you're not scraping these 1/2 ton to 2 ton slabs of metal across the seabed. And that obviously leads to much less damage to the seabed from fishing activities.
Fantastic. It must be really nice to see those changes happening as a result of your research.
Yeah, it's the real feel-good factor of working at the Institute. Yeah.
Mm. Brilliant. Well, I believe it has gone 1 o'clock, and unfortunately, we only have 30 minutes for these events. Perfect, hopefully, to slot into everybody's lunch times. But thank you so much, Chris, for that whistle-stop tour of what fieldwork is like in Greenland. And I really hope that you manage to get out there again this summer so you can continue to your work. And thank you to everyone who's been joining us today for this event, and for all of your brilliant questions as well. We are going to be running these events fortnightly on a Wednesday, so do come back and join us again. The next event will be on Wednesday the 17th of March, when we're going to be staying on dry land this time and finding out more about pangolins in the Philippines. And to make sure that you don't miss out on that event and other live events that we run at ZSL, make sure you subscribe to our Science and Conservation YouTube channel so you never miss out again in the future. You'll find lots of information on our YouTube channel about ZSL's work, a link to our website, which is www.zsl.org, so you can find out more about Chris's work and the work of other scientists and conservationists at ZSL. And especially now, while our zoos remain closed, please, if you are able to, do donate to our work. It does make all the difference, and we really appreciate it. But for now, thank you from Chris and myself, and we hope to see you again. Bye-bye.
Thanks.